Welcome to today's webinar, Working with Parents When a Child's Challenging Behaviors Impact School Success. We are grateful you are willing to spend time with us and hope that you find this information useful and supportive as you work with children who experience challenging behaviors at school and their families. Today's webinar is scheduled from 12 to 1. If you did not successfully receive the handouts for today's presentation, please email webinars@pacer.org after the presentation to request the materials. We are unable to send materials during the scheduled webinar. If you are having difficulty hearing the webinar through your computer, you can also dial into the webinar using the phone number listed in the GoToWebinar control bar. Please visit www.gotowebinar.com for support if you are having any difficulties. My name is Renelle Nelson, and I'm one of your presenters today. I have been the Children's Mental Health and Emotional or Behavioral Disorders Project Coordinator and Parent Advocate at Pacer Center for 20 years. Jennifer Thomas, Pacer's Children's Mental Health and Emotional or Behavioral Disorders Specialist, will also be presenting with me. At the end of the webinar, there will be a link to an online evaluation survey that will be available until Friday, December 8th. Once completed, a certificate of attendance will be available. Please note that if you are participating as a group, a separate evaluation for each participant must be completed to get a certificate of attendance. All participants' phones will be muted during the entire webinar. Participants can ask or submit questions to the presenters using the question answer box located in the lower portion of the webinar toolbar at any time. Type your question into the white box and click on the Send button. Please indicate if you would like to have a particular presenter respond to your question. Other participants will not see the questions, and we will not identify the person asking the question. We will try to answer as many questions as time allows. If your question is not answered or you wish to speak with a presenter, please feel free to call Pacer Center after the webinar and ask for that presenter. As advocates at Pacer Center, we take calls from parents, professionals, and others on a variety of topics and concerns. In the Children's Mental Health, Emotional or Behavioral Disorders Project, we receive a large number of calls from parents whose children are experiencing challenging behaviors at school and struggling with school success. While we know that educational laws, policies, and even school climate can play a key role in helping those students make educational progress, we also know that feelings, emotions, and difficulty with communication can also thwart that progress. In today's webinar, we want to share with you some of the real language we are hearing from parents and offer some tips and resources for addressing those concerns. Here are some examples of what we hear from parents when they call a Pacer advocate because their child with challenging behaviors is struggling at school. I don't understand why my child is failing if they have an IEP. I keep getting called to pick up my child from school because of their behavior. The school is now involving truancy or the police or child protection. They don't want my child back at school. We have meetings, but nothing changes. Parents and schools have a shared role in supporting the child. One place to start can be to understand the value that educational laws play. Educational laws can support positive engagement between parents and schools. They can also support meaningful outcomes for children or youth with mental health, emotional, or behavioral challenges. But do recognize that sometimes it can be confusing to parents to understand and navigate these laws and school-based policies and procedures. A first good tip might be to make sure that when you are talking and planning with a parent and child, you have a common ground of understanding. Do not assume that parents understand the laws, rules, policies, and procedures that guide your decision-making when it comes to discipline, for example. We often hear from parents comments like, I don't understand why they can suspend my child for the very behaviors that got him into special education. Having an honest discussion about district behavior policies and behavior expectations while developing a plan for support that considers the child's disability can decrease that confusion. Another good tip is to remember to stay within the process of those laws, policies, and procedures, but also make plans to use the process in positive and effective ways. For example, if the child with challenging behavior has documentation of disruptive behavior linked to a mood disorder or another mental health diagnosis, consider pairing the consequence with instruction so that the child will get support and help as well. Punishment does not change behavior. Instruction and support does. Think about how you can weave that into the laws, policies, and procedures that guide your decision making when there are violations of the behavior policies your school uses. While school climate is not specific to a law, it definitely impacts how parents and schools work together to support the struggling child. Think about your school climate. Is it welcoming to all parents and children, even when the child is causing significant disruption to their learning or the learning of others? Do you put the parent into the mix for planning effectively about how to meet the needs of the child when the going gets tough? Do you take into consideration their culture, beliefs, and differences they might have related to the behaviors the school is calling disruptive, disrespectful, or even challenging? We know that most of you already know the educational laws related to challenging behaviors, but we thought a quick review might be helpful. From the federal government, we have two specific laws that help support students with challenging behaviors. The first is special education, and it's based out of the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, IDEA. This law includes 5 special factors that the IEP team needs to consider in developing, reviewing, and revising a child's individualized education program. For a child with challenging behavior, the special factor that really needs to be paid attention to says, in the case of a child whose behavior impedes the child's learning or that of others, consider the use of positive behavior interventions and supports and other strategies to address that behavior. The other federal law is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This federal law is designed to protect the rights of individuals with disabilities in programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance. These programs include public school districts. To qualify under Section 504, a student must have a disability, and that disability must limit a major life function, such as learning. The Americans with Disabilities Act amendments of 2008 broadened that definition of disability as well. An example of a 504 accommodation for a child with challenging behaviors could include development of a crisis plan. A crisis plan could clearly outline what proactive accommodations could support a child or youth so that the stressors or triggers that could potentially lead to crisis-level behavior can be decreased entirely or at least in part. This could include planned breaks, using calming strategies like listening to music, using earbuds or headphones to decrease noise, having preferred seating to decrease distraction, or even altering the school day to support mental health wellness and recovery. From Minnesota, we have several laws that help support students with challenging behaviors. The Pupil Fair Dismissal Act is a Minnesota statute that outlines discipline for all students and for students with a disability. The Pupil Fair Dismissal Act provides the due process framework that schools must follow when disciplining or dismissing a student from school. The Pupil Fair Dismissal Act applies to all public schools, including charter schools and state-approved alternative education programs. The Safe and Supportive Schools Act strengthens protections against the threat of bullying in Minnesota schools. This new law provides local schools districts the guidance, support, and flexibility to adopt clear and enforceable school policies to help protect all students from bullying. The law also includes giving instructional support for students with disabilities who have special education plans. The Restrictive Procedures Minnesota statute outlines the use of restrictive procedures in Minnesota schools. Restrictive procedures means the use of physical holding or seclusion of children with disabilities in an emergency in Minnesota. Emergency means a situation where immediate intervention is needed to protect a child or other individual from physical injury. The key to remember is that restrictive procedures must not be used to punish or otherwise discipline a child. Finally, there's the Emergency Treatment of Minors Act. This medical, dental, mental, and other health services may be rendered to minors of any age without the consent of a parent or legal guardian when, in the professional's judgment, the risk to the minor's life or health is of such a nature that treatment should be given without delay, and the requirement of consent would result in delay or denial of treatment. There are also laws related to records, health, and school, and this is often an area of confusion and misunderstanding for parents and schools alike. FERPA is the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act and restricts access of school records to others who are not employed by the district. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act and restricts access to private health information, including medical records. We sometimes hear from parents that the school has requested access to private health information, diagnostic assessments, for example, in order to help them adequately evaluate or appropriately plan for the child at school. Not all private health information is appropriate to be shared with a school, and diagnostic assessments are written for treatment planning. So we suggest that parents consider what parts of the private health information about their child would help the school in educational planning, and then release that information. For example, it might be helpful for the school to know that certain medications are being used, as there may be side effects that may manifest during school hours. Or the doctor prescribing the medication may want some tracking done at school to help determine if the medication is helpful for the child. Certain diagnoses might need to be shared with the school to plan accommodations that would help support the manifestation of the disability. For example, a child diagnosed with an anxiety disorder might benefit from a designated place to go that provides him or her with a calmer, more private setting, rather than insisting they stay in the classroom setting or be required to process an incident immediately rather than waiting for the child's anxiety to decrease. Health records are often in the school, and they help guide the school's response to a child's specific stressor or trigger. Medications, allergies, unmet medical needs can impact behavior significantly. These records are protected under FERPA, but because the school employs a healthcare provider, the school is a HIPAA-covered entity and must comply with the HIPAA transactions and code sets and identifier rules with respect to transmitting healthcare claims to a health plan for payment. For example, if a public high school employs a healthcare provider that bills Medicaid electronically for services provided to a student under special education, the school is a HIPAA-covered entity and would be subject to the HIPAA requirements concerning transactions. However, if the school's provider maintains health information only in what are education records under FERPA, the school is not required to comply with the HIPAA privacy rule. Rather, the school would have to comply with FERPA's privacy requirements with respect to its educational records, including the requirement to obtain parental consent in order to disclose to Medicaid billing information about a service provided to a student. There are also district policies and procedures that influence school responses to challenging behaviors. Consideration of these policies and procedures should be part of the planning process when a child has a challenging behavior that is negatively impacting school success. We may hear from a parent that their child struggles with getting to school regularly or on time because of their depression, a sleep issue, or feeling unsafe. So attendance becomes an issue. Rather than wait for the situation to get to a level where district policies are being violated related to truancy or attendance, think about how that could be handled proactively. Can the child have a late start? Can they start their day in a classroom of a trusted adult and do a check-in before proceeding to class? Can a positive behavior support plan include incentives to motivate the child to get to school and stay in school? This list of district policies and procedures is not comprehensive, but it is meant to help you again think specifically about what might need to be discussed so that the child with a challenging behavior can be supported and experience school success. Finally, school climate is a significant contributor to school success. The Federal Department of Education held a school district leadership summit on improving school climate in July of 2015. And out of that conference, a report was generated that stated, the task of creating and sustaining safe, supportive schools is challenging, complex, and absolutely essential to improving students' connection to school and their overall achievement, as well as to ensuring the meaningful engagement of families in their children's education. It takes a village to raise a child, and school climate is part of that village. Does your school contribute meaningful experiences to the child who is struggling with their behavior? Do staff have trusted relationships with other staff, with administration? Do children have trusted relationships with staff, with administration? Do parents have trusted relationships with staff and with administration? School-wide positive behavior interventions and supports is one way to help create a school climate of positive discipline. Many of you already practice school-wide PBIS in your schools. There are also other programs to help to create a supportive school climate, but the key is in how they are implemented. A recent call from a parent summarized a supportive school climate this way. I don't blame the school. They keep trying to work with me and my son, but my son is really struggling with his behavior at school. We have had many IEP meetings to try to come up with ideas and other ways he can get support. Right now, I think we're stuck. He's getting suspended regularly, and I know he'd rather be at home, even with no privileges, than at school. I worry that being at home is not helping him learn anything new, other than the more he acts out, the more likely it is he will get to go home. I know his teacher wants to help, and the staff has done a lot already to support him, but we need some new insights. What else can we do? That parent's call is way different from this parent's call. My child keeps getting suspended for his behavior. How can they keep suspending him for the reason he's on his IEP? The school told me we've had enough meetings, and now they want to move him into another program. The program they're talking about is where the bad kids go. My kid isn't bad. They just don't want my kid there anymore. They're tired of him, and me too. Now what do? I am not sending him to that school anymore. Think about your school climate. Is it supportive to parents when the going gets tough? Is your school climate flexible and willing to make change when change is needed? Is your school open to considering other opinions and ideas? Oops. We've tried to identify key elements in law, policies, and procedures in school climate that your school staff can use when parents and students are feeling that their school is not adequately responsive to helping their child who is struggling with challenging behaviors. Here are some of the bulleted points that summarize that information. Be familiar with your school district's policies and procedures. Remember that parents may not have the same information and training that school staff have. Connect parents to resources and information so they can participate in the process effectively. Even when communication is challenging, find ways to increase positive relationships that support the student. Be open to the parent perspective and responsive to their concerns. Now I'm going to offer you some scenarios, or Jennifer is, that's going to address the top 10 questions and concerns we hear from parents when their child's behaviors are keeping them from being successful at school. Jennifer?
Thank you, Renelle. And hello, everyone. Thank you for participating. As PACER advocates, we speak with many parents from across the state of Minnesota about their school-based concerns. When parents express challenges communicating with the school, it can be very helpful to remember these two parent needs. First, parents want their concerns to be heard. And second, they want their child's needs to be met. If parents feel they are not being heard, or that their child is struggling to be successful at school, you may see warning signs such as meetings that may seem unproductive, communication that may be difficult, and or the student's progress may be limited or not agreed on. Parents can have many different concerns when their child has challenging behaviors at school. This slide provides you with an overview of 10 questions that as advocates we frequently hear from parents. However, it can take time and meaningful discussion with a parent before they get to the specific question that helps them convey their concerns effectively when speaking with a school team. It's important for parents to identify questions that help move the school into action in a way that continues to support positive growth for the student and their learning. School staff can help parents who might be struggling to know how to communicate their concerns. We're going to take a brief look at each one of these parent concerns and provide you with some information we hope will help you when a child's challenging behaviors lead to increased communication and coordination between home and school. Parent concern number 1. Will you work collaboratively with me so I can support my child's education? When a child's behaviors escalate at school, but the communication is not working well, parents will struggle. The school staff may struggle. Sometimes schools are surprised to learn that a parent feels their concerns are not being heard, even though the school has been diligent in communicating home through emails, phone calls, in-person conversations, and in meetings. In some cases, schools may find a parent hard to reach by phone or email. Parents as well can report that the school staff do not always respond in a timely way to their emails or phone messages. Sometimes parents are told that they may only communicate with some school staff, but are not allowed to communicate with others. We all have different expectations for how communication should happen, and those differences are okay. They do not need to be a barrier, and instead, they provide everyone an opportunity to problem solve how to move forward together given the different circumstances. If you think communication might be a concern to a parent you are working with, one suggestion is to review together how communication is happening. What's working with communication? What's not working? Ask the parent for feedback and validate your commitment to the parent-school partnership. If a student has an IEP or 504 plan that specifies a communication plan between home and school, it must be followed. If it is vague language or it's not being followed, make corrections. Parent concern number 2, do you understand my child's individualized needs, their strengths? Sometimes parents feel school staff are not understanding their child's individualized needs, particularly if escalating behaviors are present. If you find yourself in a situation like this, take time to better understand the student's needs and strengths. Look back at school records and how programming has been developed. Talk with the parents. Ask them questions to help you understand the information you see in the records. Written data can help us understand more about a child's challenging behaviors. That data should be objective, relevant, and effective in helping school teams better understand the challenges of a child as well as how to build from strengths. And what's positive about the interventions and supports that are being used? Research tells us that punitive measures will not result in effective change and that actually can exacerbate the challenges. If the school team does not feel they are making progress working with a student, be open to inviting others with knowledge of a child's culture, disability, experiences, or interests. Invite them to the school meetings. Encourage the parents to do the same. Parent concern number 3, how will the school implement my child's IEP or 504 plan? By knowing the student's individualized needs, adults can establish accommodations and services that are more targeted and effective. Sometimes parents learn that their child's programming is not being provided as it is documented in a 504 or IEP. They may discover that what is written on the IEP or 504 plan does not match what was discussed in a meeting or provided from a previous teacher or school. These types of challenges can lead to distrust between the parent and school. Quickly addressing these concerns is important. When reviewing an IEP or 504 plan, take time to review the accommodations and services. Are they written clearly and objectively? Are they understandable? For example, if an accommodation is written so that the student can take a movement break, but does not explain how the student will initiate that break, there may be confusion on the part of the teacher, the student, and others. One teacher may expect the student to ask permission before leaving the classroom. Another teacher may allow the student to leave the classroom quietly but without engaging the teacher verbally. Imagine if the student becomes frustrated because a teacher tells her she cannot leave for a break until after a lesson. If the student believes she is able to take the break when she needs it and not wait, this could trigger unwanted behaviors and lead to conflict with the teacher, the student, or others. Written plans are valuable when they reflect the hard work that school staff are implementing day to day and that support positive outcomes for the student. Parent concern number 4. When my child is struggling at school, how will I be notified? Parents may have concerns with how the school notifies them about their child's challenges at school. They may feel the school calls home too much. They may feel the school doesn't contact them soon enough. Parents may feel they are not able to get enough information from school when an incident occurs. As discussed earlier, help parents understand how to communicate with you by developing a communication plan that includes how parents will be notified in the event of behavior concerns. Parents do not always know which school communication is required. Provide resources and helpful explanations so they can understand the process they are participating in. For example, suspensions, uses of restrictive procedures, manifestation determinations, all of these involve certain communications and meetings that a parent may be new to or unfamiliar with. And provide parents with documentation that is objective and free from judgment. Make sure it's fair. Parents may be receiving more documentation about how their child is struggling than they are receiving about how their child is succeeding. This can create stress for parents and make communication challenging. On the other hand, parents sometimes are being told their child is doing very well and that the school staff does not have concerns. This may contradict other information, such as grades, attendance, feedback from the student, or even information shared from another school staff. If there are contradictions or disagreements about a child's progress, go ahead and validate it. Meet and review the information. Remember that documentation is just important and should be helpful for the school team in deciding on the action steps of how best to support the student. Parent concern number 6. Why isn't my child making progress? Oops, I'm sorry, we're on number 5. Parent concern number 5. How will my child be safe and supported at school? Sometimes parents are concerned because their child has unresolved bullying concerns, or their child may be struggling to interact positively with the school staff or other students. A student who does not feel safe or supported at school is at risk of school refusal, avoiding classes, or the school in its entirety. School avoidance or school refusal is a behavior that gets in the way of a student's learning, and it is important to utilize the special education and/or 504 process, which Renelle explained about earlier. If a student shows these signs but has not been evaluated, communicate with your school about the referral process for special education evaluation and/or 504 consideration. Watch out for truancy. There are many school teams who do reduce a student's vulnerability to this type of court involvement by effectively utilizing the special education and 504 process. And now, parent concern number 6. Why isn't my child making progress? This question is similar to the previous slide in that it is important to come together and look at all information relevant to the child's school experience. As advocates, we help parents understand how to look for progress, particularly if their child has an IEP. This helps parents know how to participate better with school meetings and to ask questions that can help the team as a whole engage in meaningful discussion. School staff can let parents know what type of curriculum, instruction, and programming is being used and how progress will be measured for each goal area. Do not rely solely on teacher report or teacher data to measure progress because this would be limited and potentially subjective. Be willing to try other curriculum or approaches to working with a child's individualized needs if they are not making progress. For special education, many times schools are writing IEP goals that do not show baseline data, and this can make it very difficult for a parent to understand whether their child is indeed making progress. A note on progress reports. If you check the box adequate progress, but do not provide enough objective information about how that decision was determined, parents again can get confused. Remember as well, if a student is not feeling they are making progress on academics, this can exacerbate behavior challenges. Parent concern number 7, if you don't feel that the school is working for my child, what's next? This is really important. Be cautious with your words. There is a process to follow if a child's school placement is not working. Know that process and stay within it. This includes a change in placement, suspension, expulsion. A discussion about school placement changes or concern that the current placement is not working for the student can be very challenging. School teams that take time addressing the earlier parent questions that have been presented in this webinar are able to draw from a child's strengths, individualized needs, and clear and helpful data when and if they need to discuss changes in a school placement. If other school options are being considered, encourage parents to visit and ask questions. Meet afterwards and discuss what was learned from the visit. Parent concern number 8. How will you help my child be prepared for life after high school? If a student's IEP or 504 plan does not address transition planning in a proactive way, students with challenging behaviors may be at risk of dropping out of school. Learn how the IEP and 504 plans can assist students to address post-high school goals and get the student involved in their planning for high school and beyond as early as possible. It's important to support a student's sense of hope for their future. A school team's efforts to stay engaged with them and parents through the process serves an important function. Parent concern number 9. How can we support my child's education through their treatment and recovery process? The difference between school and treatment is this. School is mandated. Treatment is voluntary unless court-ordered. Treatment is based on different criteria than education, particularly medical necessity, and it's important for school staff to respect the boundary between school records and protected health information, medical records, as Renelle explained earlier. Releases of information should be limited to educationally relevant information. There are some cases where parents are being told by a school staff that their child needs treatment and may try to refer the parent away from the school to a treatment location. Watch out for this because parents may interpret this as the school suggesting the child should leave the school or that the school is requiring or making a recommendation for treatment. School staff should make sure they are working within their licensure when talking with parents and students. Avoid any statements that may sound as though you are making a treatment recommendation if this is outside the area of your responsibilities. And lastly, our final parent concern is, what if I disagree? Disagreement happens. Remember, there is a dispute resolution process that gives options to parents and schools. Help parents know about those options and who they can contact for additional information. A parent's disagreement with a school does not need to be adversarial and can be productive for both parties. Remember, if trust breaks down, don't get discouraged and reach out for help from others when needed. I'm going to pass it back to Renelle here.
This has gone a little quicker than we expected, so you're probably all happy about that. But I did want to kind of review some of the key things that we've talked about. As PACER advocates, we typically get calls from parents when things aren't going well. We rarely get calls from parents who say, I want to report everything's working great. When we do get that, you'll probably see fireworks coming out of our cubbies or our offices because we're excited that parents are engaged and the process is working. Our intention in today's webinar was to really help you understand what we're hearing from parents and to try to reframe it in a positive way that will allow you to maybe put yourself back more specifically into the very laws and processes and policies and procedures that schools and other people have worked very hard to put together as a scaffolding for a successful educational experience. Um, Children who have challenging behaviors struggle. We know that to be in school and to get to school and to stay in school. It's oftentimes a very difficult place for them to be. I'm often amazed at some of the stories that I hear, and yet I know that this parent is working as hard as they can to get their child to school every day, and the child is trying hard to stay there every day. And so I wanted to, again, just kind of refocus that when there's conflict, it's because change is needed. And so conflict is a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. And we should be looking at it as an opportunity to look at other ways to revisit what's not working. If the challenging behavior of a child is continuing, there must be some kind of unmet need that's happening. We don't have crystal balls. We can't see into the future. Sometimes we struggle even to understand how the past relates to our planning right now. And children change. They're not inanimate objects. They change daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes minute by minute. Sometimes children are very successful in school in the morning and very unsuccessful in the afternoon. Sometimes they're successful with one teacher or within one classroom setting and not within another. And we know that school is a very fluid process and requires a lot of multitasking. Social emotional learning is a huge component of contributing to school success. And many of our children with challenging behaviors lack some of those key elements in social emotional learning. They don't have those strategies and those core components figured out yet, and they may struggle with them, and it may definitely be related to their disability or the manifestation of their disability. So remember, if you hear a parent who's saying, I don't understand why my child is failing, they have an IEP, you must not be doing your job, you must not be following the IEP, what aren't you doing right? It's not that they're challenging you, it's that they're really trying to understand what's not working. Why does there continue to be an unmet need, and what do we need to do to figure that out? And we presented you with that scaffolding and that framework of laws and procedures that we can kind of use as a way to get back into that process. Let's try to figure this out. Most teachers work very hard to not only connect with their students, but to make sure that their students are benefiting from their instruction. As a former teacher, I felt it was probably the most important job on earth. And when my children weren't learning or making progress, I felt myself that I needed to do something differently or change something up. I took it very seriously. When you get a parent who says, don't call me anymore, I'm not going to pick up my child, it's your responsibility to make sure that my child stays in school, and you're in a situation where the child is becoming unsafe in school, make sure that you look back at those laws, those restrictive procedures, the other kinds of policies and procedures you're using, and then look outside those boxes to see if there are other people or experts or things you can draw on to try to help support that child so that that kind of behavior isn't causing that kind of response, or that kind of behavior is stopping and that kind of response won't have to happen anymore. We really have discovered over the years of advocacy work that we've done that a lot of what happens between schools and parents is about a breakdown in communication. And we want to make sure that we can help facilitate that communication in an appropriate way. Feel comfortable and find resources to help parents facilitate their communication style. And look for those yourself. Remember that we're all in it as a village to try to help a child learn not just the academic parts of school, but also how to get along with everybody and how to work together as a group so that we can have a successful experience within a community of support. There is some time for questions. We'd be happy to open it up to questions if there are any. So we'll keep an eye on the question box. We do want to express our appreciation to you because we know you have a really important role in supporting children and youth who are impacted by their behavioral health challenges. And we know that these students oftentimes interact with many different service providers and that they've often faced many changes in their school settings or school programming. And this makes parent-school partnerships even more crucial and powerful. Our students and our children watch us and how we problem solve, how we can maintain hope, and how we not give up when working as a team on their behalf.
Hello everybody, this is Jamie Smith. I wanted to quickly add before we finalize here, I think it was mentioned early on about the survey for this. Actually what we'll do is gather the report from our GoToMeeting software, and we will send you all the people who did log in today will send you an email link to that survey. You might see it later today, otherwise definitely on Monday. Make sure you check your email junk mail or clutter inbox just in case it lands there. Otherwise, if you have an issue with it, just email us at webinars, WEBINARS @pacer.org.
Thanks, Jamie. Please note also that Jennifer and I and other advocates at Pacer Center are more than willing to support you in your in the work that you do, and we work very hard with parents to give them the information, resources, and supports they need so that they can be an effective team member in this process of helping to support their child with challenging behaviors at school. I guess we'll wrap it up. We didn't have any questions coming in. We hope this was somewhat helpful and that it had a caveat or two of useful information for you. Remember that we have wonderful resources here at Pacer. Most of them are downloadable and free. Do we have a question?
Yeah, we did have something come in regarding the technical end, so I'll interject here. Will we be provided the PowerPoint? Actually, the PowerPoint is available as a PDF in your handouts. You'll see on that webinar control panel under handouts. You can download it from there. If we wrap up and you don't get it and you want to receive it, just use that email address again, webinars@pacer.org. Also, it was mentioned, will it be archived? Yes, we are. This session is being recorded, and we will post it to the Pacer website probably sometime next week. And again, if you're interested in that, viewing that archived version, just email us at webinars@pacer.org and we'll send you that link. People who do watch it via an archive, should you be hearing this, watching it as an archive, we do not provide a certificate of attendance for viewing it as an archived version. We also wanted to add, if you're watching this as a group, you'll need each member of your group to complete a survey. So if when you receive that survey link, if you could just forward it to your entire group, and then they'll complete it. The survey will close next Friday, I believe December 8th, and so you have plenty of time to complete it. And upon completion, when you click done, you'll then be actually directed right to the certificate of attendance so that you can then print it right from that link.
Thank you, Jamie, and Jennifer and I thank you for taking time out of your busy day to participate in this webinar. And again, please feel free to give us to call us or contact us if you have any questions related to this particular webinar or any other questions. We'd be happy to work with you and support the efforts that you are putting forward to help support children with challenging behaviors so that they can experience school success. Have a great day.